All right, good afternoon, everybody. Steve Kornacki here at the big board. Oh, this thing is starting to fill out, huh? We've been a couple weeks at this board. It's been pretty plain sometimes, but now it's just about ready to go for the big night, election night. Midterm 2018 it is now just 4 days away. We've been counting it down, and now in only 4 days, Americans will head to the polls. They'll close the polls. They'll tally the votes, and we will start reporting them here, one district at a time, all across the country, trying to answer that question: which party is going to get to 218 and control of the House? Will Republicans hang on? Will Democrats get it back for the first time since 2010? And also, while we're at it, we might as well talk about the Senate. Republicans trying to cling to a narrow majority there. Can Democrats overcome what is a very difficult map for them on the Senate side this year and actually get control of the Senate? So again, a little look here. This thing is going to be live. It's going to be, numbers are going to be changing. Countdown clocks are going to be ticking away on election night. So this thing, it's going to be a lot more going on, but you're getting a bit of a peek at what we're going to be showing you, what we're going to have to work with on election night just 4 nights from now. But here is our daily show. Consider this our pregame show for election night. We've been doing it now for a couple weeks, heading up to election day. We've been doing it every day around this time, around noon every day. We take you through the latest numbers we see. We talk to some of the smartest people we know when it comes to watching the trends, looking at the numbers, digging into all the information that is out there, trying to make sense of what is taking shape and what's going to play out on Tuesday. So we will get to today's special guest in just a minute. But first, we thought again, I said, well, we've got this board kind of up and running. Why don't we show you a little bit more what's inside here and what we can kind of expect on Tuesday night? So one of the things, obviously, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Tuesday night. It is the bottom line question: who's going to get control of the House? Are Democrats going to get a net gain of 23 seats? They need to get a net gain of 23 Republican seats. If they can do that, they get a majority. So that's the number we're going to keep an eye on. That's going to count down or count up, as the case may be, throughout the night. And this is a map you're going to be seeing a lot of, a screen you're going to be seeing a lot of as the night unfolds in election night. You can see here it's split into two sides. What you see, look, the gray, you see a lot of gray here. It accounts for all 435 districts in the country. But of course, a lot of those districts just aren't competitive. We pretty much know ahead of time this one's going to go for a Democrat, this one's going to go for a Republican. Not a lot of suspense. So what you really see in yellow here on the screen, these yellow blotches all over the place, this is where we think the action is. This is where we think control of the House is going to be determined. What you see on this screen are 66 districts that we think they are 66 Republican-held districts where we think Democrats have their best chances of flipping those seats. So you can see this is where they are geographically, and then on the right side of your screen, these are the districts. We're just going to list them right here. And what you're going to see happen throughout the night on election night, first poll closing is going to come at 6 o'clock in Kentucky. And you can see there is a district in Kentucky that's part of this battleground, a Republican-held district near Lexington that Democrats are targeting. When that result gets called, I'll give you an example of how this is going to work. Let's find Kentucky 6 here. Let's say the Republicans hold Kentucky 6. It will light up red on your screen. It will light up red on the map over here. And this bottom line number, which is the story of the night, it'll stay the same because Republicans successfully held the seat. But let's say, oh, I got that wrong. They just did a recount. They told us the Democrat actually won Kentucky 6. So this is what will happen instead. You'll see it turn blue. Now look what happened up here. The counter went down from 23 to 22. Why? Because Democrats just flipped a seat. They just turned a Republican seat blue. They need a net gain of 23. This is 1. This would put them on the way. You'd see blue fill up. So what you'll see is this map will start to take shape. One poll closing time after another from East Coast to West Coast, moving east to west, and this grid will start to take shape. And basically, the story of the night will reveal itself. The more blue you are seeing here, the better a night Democrats are having. The more red you see here, the better night Republicans are having. If at the end of the night, Democrats can get a net of 23 of these, they'll control the House. If they fall short, they will not have the House. And the other wild card in this, of course, there are, can't get it up on the screen here, but we will have it for Tuesday night, I promise you. There are a couple of seats. Not many. We're giving you a list of 66 Republican seats that Democrats have a chance of flipping. There's a handful of Democratic seats that Republicans have a chance of flipping. So Republicans could add to that number, make Democrats' path a little bit more complicated. So we will be showing you those too. But we know the basic storyline for this election. The Democrats are on offense. The Republicans are playing defense. We think this is the basic battlefield where they're going to be fighting it out. And we're going to be here going district by district. First poll closing time is going to be 6 p.m. on Tuesday. That district there in Kentucky, we're going to start getting numbers out of there. 7 o'clock, we're going to get, Virginia. Virginia's going to be a huge state on Tuesday night. We got 4 districts, right here. 4 Republican-held seats the Democrats are targeting. The polls have been favorable to them in the 10th district. This is right outside Washington, D.C. These other 3 much more in that toss-up category. What are Democrats going to be able to do there? Are Republicans going to be able to hold them off in 3 of those districts? Republicans would feel very good if they got out of Virginia, only losing that 10th district. Florida, we're going to get poll closings in Florida at 7 o'clock in most of the state. We got a bunch of districts in Florida we're keeping an eye on, too. So it's going to start at 6. We'll be focused on that one district at 6. By 7 o'clock, we're going to add about a dozen into the mix. And then by 8 o'clock, it's just going to sort of explode. And you're going to see activity all over the country. It's going to be, I'm not just saying this to hype it, it's going to be a midterm election night like you haven't seen before, because we are focusing in on the House district by district in a way we just haven't done it before. We haven't had the kind of suspense we have, and frankly, we haven't had the kind of tools we've had to tell you that story on TV. So very excited about this, and I hope you're going to be a part of that experience on Tuesday night. So again, that's what we got coming up for you. But just in terms of setting the scene here, in the home stretch in these final few days, trying to figure out the big picture question of, is this going to break one way or the other in the closing days? Is there going to be an advantage for Democrats of a couple points at the last minute? Is there going to be an advantage for Republicans of a couple points at the last minute? We've been checking this number all through the fall. What you see here is the average approval rating. All the polls that are out there on Donald Trump and his job approval, average them together. What's his average approval rating? It clocks in this morning at 43.9%. Now, a week ago, on this day, we checked this number. We showed you it was 44.7. And we said that was, by Trump standards, that was about as good as it's gotten for him during his presidency. 44.7 a week ago, down 0.8 of a point in the average in a week, down to 43.9. So that's not great news for Republicans, but they would still say, Republicans would tell you, 40, 41, you're talking possible Democratic wave there. They thought, if they could get him around 44%, maybe a tick or two higher, Republicans were saying they might have a fighting chance to keep the House. So it's interesting. We will get some more polls this weekend. Let's see. Does it come down further? Does it stabilize? Does it even go back up? I think we're going to get a few more readouts this weekend that might clarify that a little bit. And again, this was the other question we've been tracking too, that enthusiasm gap. This seemed to be the story of October. Our poll over the summer showed Democrats with a double, the percent who say they are really excited, really interested in voting in the midterms. For Democrats, it was 63-52 over Republicans over the summer, an 11-point enthusiasm gap. Historically, you go back, you look at past midterm waves, you've seen double-digit enthusiasm gaps in favor of the party that got the wave. We were seeing this all year in our poll. We saw it right before Labor Day. Then we took another poll a couple weeks ago. Enthusiasm gap, suddenly a different story. Democratic enthusiasm still through the roof, but Republican enthusiasm had climbed way up there, and that gap was down to 4 points. So that was an interesting twist, an interesting variable when we want to know in the final days of this campaign, and we think we may find out with a little bit more polling. We want to find out, has that gap remained the same since then? Has it gone back up? Has it gotten even more Republican? I think that might be an interesting variable, too, in these final days. So, again, Democrats, they are on offense. Republicans are on defense. There are a lot of paths. We showed you the 66 that we got on the screen for Democrats to get to that 23. We also know that even though there could be all sorts of paths to victory for one side, they don't always get there. Hillary Clinton can tell you how that goes 2 years ago on Election Day. So with that in mind, that's sort of a little sneak peek of what we got planned for you on Tuesday. Imagine how exciting this board's going to be when we got real, actual numbers coming in only 4 days away. But right now, let's bring in our guest for today. I say we always try to get one of the smartest people out there. Well, here's somebody whose name and whose poll we have used and talked about a lot this fall. Patrick Murray, he's the director of the Monmouth poll, the Monmouth University poll, and he joins us now. Patrick, thanks for taking a few minutes. And yes, we have been relying on the Monmouth poll for sort of a readout of these House races, of this House battlefield. I want to go deep inside the numbers with you here, but I guess I want to start with sort of a big picture question. 4 days out, I think the question everybody's sort of asking themselves right now is this in the final days nationally? Is this breaking toward one side, breaking toward the other? Do you have any evidence of it breaking one way or the other in a more decisive way in these final days?
Decisive, no. I mean, we're seeing a shift. It's a notable shift towards the Democrats in these last few days, but not a huge shift. And the comparison I make is to those special elections that we've had this past year, Pennsylvania 18, Ohio 12, even the Alabama Senate race, where we saw a huge swing towards the Democrat in the last 4 weeks of each of those campaigns. And this, we're just not seeing it. Or maybe a 2.3 point. We're seeing an uptick among the Democratic base group of white women with a college education. I mean, that's the one group that we've been talking about that the Democrats are counting on, and that group is improving. Another thing
in this final week,
in the final week, by a few points. And this is, if this was a level playing field, we wouldn't even be discussing the outcome wouldn't be up for grabs. I mean, the Democrats would easily win this. So obviously, the map is not a level playing field. So it's a lot of close races. That's what you're pointing out, is a lot of close races, which means a few thousand voters coming out or staying home in each of these districts could determine control of the House. So white women with a college degree, that number has ticked up. Another number that I've seen that's ticked up in the polling are new midterm voters. It's another group we're going to be paying attention to closely on election night. These are folks who haven't shown up in midterms in the past, or at least recently. They didn't show up in 2014, they didn't show up in 2010. That group is making up a significantly large proportion of the electorate right now. In our models, it's about 1 in 5, which is unusually high. And we've seen that group start breaking more for the Democrat than the Republican in their vote choice for House. So those are two groups that the Democrats are really counting on.
So let's go through those. You say new voters. You're saying 1 in 5 voters. You're saying would be new voters
in midterms.
In midterms, right?
They vote in presidential years, but they never come out for these other races. And there's a high level of enthusiasm for coming out in this race, and it's now growing even higher on the Democratic side than the Republican side. So these are the harder voters for Democrats to get out, but if they do get them out, the trend is showing that that's going to help them to a margin of victory.
So if you're seeing in your poll about 1 in 5, you say are these new, in terms of new to midterm voters, what would you, in a more normal midterm, like back in 2014, what would that have been, do you think?
You generally say like 10% or less.
So double potentially
it's potentially doubled. Obviously, these are polling, and we'll know. And in fact, we'll be looking. There's a question on the exit poll that looks at new midterm voters, and so we'll be able to take a look at them on Tuesday night as well and see how that holds up.
And in terms of you saying white suburban women, we can put this up on the screen here. This is a group. This is how they voted in the 2016 election. They broke for Donald Trump. This, according to the exit polls, they broke for Donald Trump 54% to 42%. You see their counterparts there. This number surprises me a bit to look at. I knew Trump had won this group. I didn't realize it was this decisive in the exit poll. But Trump 64-28 among white suburban men. So you're saying white suburban women. So it was 54-42 for Trump in 2016. What's a number Democrats should be shooting for in that group in 2018?
They should be looking to win this group of white suburban women. But it's going to play out differently in each region of the country. And actually, I'm paying specifically attention to that. So the Northeast, actually, Clinton won white suburban women in the Northeast and in the West. She lost them by a lot in the South and the Midwest. And then the Midwest is where the change electorate's coming in. But in the Northeast, that's where we're seeing a huge jump in these white suburban women in terms of supporting the Democrat, whereas they were a little more divided in the 2016 presidential. And you pointed out, where we're going to look at early in the night, Virginia, for example. Those 4 races could tell us right away which direction this is all going on, because it's possible that the Democrats could get very close to that 23 net seats that they need in the House just from the Northeast alone if these shifts among white suburban women hold, because that's where they're playing out. Now, if we go to the Midwest, this is where the change electorate is. This is where those voters who just want change are. And there's an interesting difference between the white suburbs and the white rural voters out there that we're going to be paying attention to again for the swing from Trump support to Democratic support on Tuesday night. It's not just going to affect the House. It's going to affect governor's races. You got Scott Walker in Wisconsin, for example. It's going to affect state legislative races. It's going to affect Senate races out there as well if we see a big swing among that group. Then we go out to the West, and we go to the South and particularly the Sun Belt, and that's an area where Latino men really, I think, hold the key to how that outcome is going to be. We're finding that Latino men are not a monolithic group. They're almost evenly divided, a little edge to Democrats in their House preferences right now. And they're going to determine who wins those Southern California seats. And their issue, they're like in these other races, healthcare costs, concerns about healthcare insecurity. That's what's playing out. And that's one of the reasons why we see all these ads about pre-existing condition protections from the Democrats. On the Republican side, we see this late push on immigration, immigrant crime, border security, and birthright citizenship. And the reason why they're pushing that is that they're finding that that's a strong Republican message with their base of white men without a college degree. But it also plays well among a large number of Latino male voters in these southern districts. And that's why Republicans are doing a little stronger, I think, in Southern California than in other districts when you just look at the demographics. Because the Southern California districts in many ways look like these Northeast suburban districts, highly educated, high income, but the diversity in those districts is what makes them a lot different. And it's that those Latino men who could go one way or the other.
That's counter to a lot of people's intuition, I think, and I think that's very interesting. I wonder, is there a possibility here, just listening to how you broke that down, that this could end up being not so much a national wave as a regional wave?
Right.
As so okay, New Jersey, maybe some of these suburban Virginia, maybe even New York, the Northeast, essentially what you're describing, where these white suburban women you think are most ripe for the Democrats, where there's a tidal wave there that favors the Democrats. Right. But then you get out of that region, and it's just a different story.
And the wave stops. It hits a seawall, basically, once you get to the Appalachian Mountains, for example. That's a possibility. That could play out that way because the type of voters and the issues that are playing out are different in each region, and the type of voter that each side needs to get out is a little different in terms of both their numbers and in terms of their preferences. So that's why I'm really paying attention to these regions and separating them differently, because I think the Democrats have a really strong stance already in the Northeast, and I think they're going to pick up a lot of seats there just because of the way the winds are blowing. But the Midwest is still up for grabs. The South is still up for grabs. The Southern California is still up for grabs as well. And then that's going to play out for talking about Latino men. We're talking about House races in Southern California. Let's talk about Senate races in Nevada and Arizona, for example, and in Florida as well. Although it looks like the Democrats are doing well there because of the different kinds of voters that are there.
But that's interesting. If the Republicans overperform. There's the 10th district of California. I can think of the 39th, the 25th. Large Latino populations. If the Republicans hang on in places like that, you're saying one thing we might be looking at election night is Latino men.
And those
support for Republicans there. Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm curious too. There's this comparison that's been out there, and it's a matter of debate. I think people who watch elections closely. Using what happened last year in Virginia, in the governor's race in Virginia a year ago, as a model for what could happen in the midterm this year. And what happened last year in Virginia, it feels to me like if you talk to a Democrat, you get one version of events from that. And then the version of events is the Democrat won, obviously. Won by 9 points. That was an improvement. It was one of the best performances for Democrats ever. And flipped, I think it was 17 state legislative seats. And so they say, well, if that happened in Virginia last year, that's a microcosm of what's going to happen nationally. And what the Republican answer to that is, okay, well, yes, the Democrat won by 9, but Clinton won by 6, so it wasn't that big of a difference. And that 6 to 9 jump was heavily concentrated in the suburbs outside Washington, D.C. And those state legislative districts that flipped were basically all districts that Clinton had won in 16, just matching up. And they say, well, if you sort of superimpose that on a national map, you get improvement for Democrats, but not a national wave. And they'd be. Do you come down on one side of that?
That's one of the things I've actually been specifically looking at in our polling of House districts, because what seems to be is that where you live, if you live among a lot of Republicans or you live among a lot of Democrats, had an impact on who turned out to vote. So what we did is, for example, the Virginia election, I think, and I don't have this number exactly, but I think it's about 29% of Virginia's vote typically comes from Northern Virginia in any given election. And I think that went up to 31 or 32%. All Democrats coming out in Northern Virginia. So it was Democrats coming out in Democratic areas. We saw that in the Alabama special Senate election in December of last year. It was the Black Belt in Birmingham. where the proportion of the electorate that came from those areas was higher than it ever had been. So that's Democratic enthusiasm for you. It's kind of, we got a mixed picture from the House specials, but that's what we're looking at. And if you know, we put out a couple of different models. One's called our Dem Surge model, which is based on that Virginia turnout picture. If you can get a lot of Democrats turning out in Democratic areas, this is what the picture would look like. And I think the Republicans are right, though. We're not seeing the backing behind that shows that shift of them turning out, is that they had already dug in early.
Right.
So our polling from the summer already caught them. They weren't just catching up and starting to pay attention. They were paying attention from day one. It was the Republicans who took a while to catch up and pay attention. But one of the things that I am seeing is that Democrats are doing extremely strong and compared to how Clinton did in 2016 in Democratic precincts. Republicans are not doing quite as strong in Republican precincts. And that's why these races are close. I mean, these House races that we're talking about competitive have been won by high single or double digits by these Republican incumbents over past cycles. The reason why they're close now is the vote in the Republican precincts of those districts is not as Republican as it used to be.
So that speaks to this question I have, because I want to see, I think we may have a poll coming out this weekend, an NBC poll I'm curious to look at. Because in the middle of October, we took this NBC Wall Street Journal poll, and that enthusiasm gap I just showed had fallen to 4 points.
Right.
And my question has been, okay, is it going to stay that way until Election Day, or is that going to be a blip, and by Election Day it's back to double digits? So you're seeing a gap there, it sounds like. Can you quantify it?
It's a small gap. It's not the same thing that you just showed on the screen. It's not as large as it was in the summer, but it's still there.
Yeah.
It's holding. And that's key. And what we're seeing, and again, we've been polling a lot of the suburban districts. So that's a key here. We're talking about the suburban districts in most part, is that there are a lot of moderate Republican voters there who are long-term Republican voters but are not happy with the direction of the party. They're not happy with the way Trump has handled himself. And that's why we see Democrats doing better in these Republican areas. It's because that moderate voter has decided to, turn and cross party lines. Then I think, and the Democratic enthusiasm continues to hold. And that's a key.
And how would you, it feels to me, I'm just thinking back to recent past midterm elections, and I was thinking 2010, the Tea Party wave for Republicans, you kind of knew heading into it where that was going. It was just going to be huge for Republicans. They're going to get the House. 2006, you kind of knew Democrats were going to get the House. It was going to be that. All the indicators seemed to line up with it. Even 2014, I think you could call it a Republican wave. It seemed a little sneaky, but it ended up being a Republican wave. How does this one, this is a qualitative question, but you look at the numbers, I'm wondering what your feeling is about all the numbers you're looking at. How does this one feel heading into Election Day compared to the past three?
It feels like it's like we're on a tempest in the middle of the sea, and it can go either way. I think the trend is towards Democrats picking up the House, but again, by how much? I think the trend shows them they're going to get at least 25 seats, but is it going to stop there, or are they going to pick up another 25 and get 50? It could go either way. And the same thing with the Senate. We've been talking about the Senate, and it looks like a little trend towards the Democrats, particularly in these diverse southwestern states. But that could swing back the other way in the next couple of days. What happened was we all kind of thought, looking at the special elections, where we saw consistently Democratic surge, Democratic surge, Democratic surge, that's how it was going to play out in November. And that hasn't been the case.
Right. It was very tempting to look at those and say, well, the Democrats on average have improved 11 points, improved them 11 points in every district across the country, and they gain 114 seats or something. But it feels to me like in my mind, there is this scenario, the dream scenario for Republicans at this point is what? They hold the House by about 5. And the dream scenario for Democrats is like a gain of 50 on there. Is that about the range?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, I think that the Republicans would happy holding the House by 1. I mean,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, that's...
Well, every member becomes a free agent and is susceptible, to the best offer.
And I've already heard some rumors from some members of Congress that I know that there are pitches to...
There's a couple. It's not the way it used to be, where you had a lot of conservative Democrats, you had liberal Republicans, and there were natural candidates. But there are a couple in there.
Yeah, but you
might wonder about.
If Republicans lose a number of seats, they're going to lose moderate Democrats, so moderate Republicans.
Right.
So the moderate Republicans are going to get a shrinking proportion of the caucus. And I see some Democrats who are trying to pick off some of those moderate Republicans and bring them over to
That's interesting.
their side.
There's that one Democrat.
So whatever happens at the end of it with this election result, still might not
There
be
could
over.
be some, right. Well, we've got the overtime scenario in California.
exactly.
We've got the horse trading scenario for a House majority. And then, frankly, even if Democrats do get the majority, let's say by 10 seats or something, how many of these Democrats going to Washington have campaigns saying I won't vote for Nancy Pelosi?
Right. Well, that's
so that becomes the story.
And the Congressional Black Caucus has just stepped forward and said we we're going to take one of the two top leadership positions. And I know there's already a lot of horse trading, and some folks who have had issues with Nancy Pelosi in the past are siding with the Black Caucus. So
one election ends, the next one begins, and on.
And then we got to talk about 2020 is going to be a
we're
mix
getting
of
ready.
all this
We're getting ready for that. That's that'll start with. It'll give it 2 days for that maybe. Patrick Murray from Monmouth. Thank you. We've been using your polls all fall. Been a huge help.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Thank you all for watching at home. And again, you got a little taste of what's to come on Tuesday night. We will be back, though, on Monday, noon. We'll be back tomorrow, noon Eastern, and all the way through Election Day. This is the pregame show, The Real Thing, 6 p.m. Tuesday night. Stay tuned.